morning, everyone. Welcome to the Stockyard in Headland, Alabama. My name is Eric Duhame. I'm the owner of the Stockyard along with my wife, Erica. We'd like to welcome you to the Shepherd Station, which is being hosted at the Stockyard. With me today is Andy Hughes, former sheriff of Houston County, longtime law enforcement officer, retired from Aaliyah with the state of Alabama, still stays active in the law enforcement community, and also Thomas Brown, who is the assistant pastor at Gateway Church in Headland, Alabama, which everyone is welcome to attend. We love to see new people come. Tell you a little bit about the Stockyard. The Stockyard is a small restaurant, coffee shop, and ice cream shop located on the square in Headland. This business was given to myself and my wife, and we looked at it as more of a ministry than a business. We felt like God gave it to us so we could have a mission field to promote Christ, promote what God wants us to do as followers of Christ, and just give us a platform. And in doing so, he's also put this on all three of us here today to start bringing a motivating word and message to not only the men out there, but everybody out there listening to the podcast. But what we want to do is we want to drive this towards men becoming men again, men becoming godly men, motivate, inspire, and do the things that God wants us to do as Christian men, living our lives and leading our families. So with that, we're also going to be focusing on a lot of topics that are very dear to myself and Andy Hughes. I'm a longtime law enforcement officer. I've got almost 30 years in the business. I would like to say that I'm retired, but unfortunately I'm still involved in it. Maybe one day I'll be able to put the badge down. But we also, Andy and I have seen a trend in the newer generation of law enforcement. We want to see that change a little bit. We want to see it get back to a service-driven heart. And with that, Andy Hughes has come up with a very powerful program. And I'm going to turn things over to him at this point right now so he can talk about Bear the Sword.
Well, Eric, first of all, I'd like to thank you for including me in this venture. I know we've talked about it for a while, and today we're finally, getting things kicked off. And, I'm excited about it, and I'm excited about the message that we could put out there, and I'm excited about some interaction that we may have from our audience as we build an audience. But it's a pleasure to be here with you and Thomas today. There is a crisis in law enforcement today. Recruitment and retention is really, it's a crisis in the United States of America, recruitment and retention of law enforcement officers. And a lot of this started back in 2014 with the Ferguson incident. Had a young man that was shot and killed by a law enforcement officer there. And some members of the community saw it as a murder, basically, when the law enforcement officer was actually being attacked. Some liberal forces in the media grabbed a hold of this and went forward with it, and pretty much just put out a false narrative across the nation about law enforcement. The officer that shot the individual that had just been involved in a robbery, he was exonerated by a very liberal United States Department of Justice, and Eric Holder being the Attorney General at the time under the Obama administration.
That's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, and he was exonerated, but still, this young man was he was crucified. The whole incident was just blown way out of proportion and made it something to be that it wasn't. So 2014 really started things kind of going downhill for law enforcement here in the United States.
Not to interrupt you or anything, but I mean, seriously, you're right. You've heard so many times coming out, you touched on it with the mainstream media. The mainstream media is going to spin a narrative every time. And it's not that I'm against any kind of reporters. Some guys out there are really trying to put out the truth. But the biggest thing is the mainstream media is going to spin it to whichever side's going to, benefit them. But you get this from Ferguson, and we've talked about it so many times in law enforcement. Well, why didn't the officer do this, or why didn't the officer do that? But it's the Ferguson effect. Mm-hmm. That's a term that's come out a lot.
Right.
Officers are scared to act on certain things where they should act. And sometimes, I don't ever want to see anyone lose their life. That is not what we do as cops. we protect. But sometimes, unfortunately, things take place and you're put in a position where you don't have a choice. And if you don't act, you're not only going to endanger yourself, but you endanger the other innocents around you. And a lot of times, since 2014, still being active in law enforcement, we've seen where, how can I put this? Officers would fail to act. Officers or deputies or any law enforcement officer, they fail to act, and it's got to do with what are the repercussions going to be if I do this. They may have been, okay, I'm justified in what I do. It's necessary. I have to do this. But what are going to be the what are the repercussions going to be when I do that?
Yeah. You don't have time to think about that.
I know.
When you're trying to make a
the
split
problem
second
is they're doing
decision.
Yeah.
There are two things. If you're going to be a law enforcement officer, there are two things that you absolutely have to be sure of. Number one is that you can take another human life if absolutely necessary in the line of duty. The other thing is that you must be willing to risk your life for people that you don't know. And if you cannot resign yourself to those two facts, then you probably need to seek out another profession. You're not truly called to be a law enforcement officer. And I fault nobody for not being able to do either of those two things. That's not a fault. I mean, that's both of those things go totally against what our human nature actually is.
That's exactly right. I was about to say that. It's not a normal thing to point any weapon at some other person, press the trigger, and know that you're potentially going to end their life. That's not normal. And as law enforcement, we don't need to be, so closed off to human emotion that, we've got to make decisions based on compassion, based on the right thing to do. But you're right. You have to be able to make that split second decision, and you have to. You've already got to have that resolve that I can do this if I have to. You're right. I'm not faulting anybody that can't do that. There's not a lot of people who can do that. But going back to Ferguson, that being the catalyst, was it really the catalyst, or was it before that, or was that just the big thing that really kicked it off?
Yeah, I think that was the big thing that kicked it off. There might have been some other incidents before that, but Ferguson was the main one, the most recent one. And then, the Ferguson incident, and there were probably a couple more between then and 2020, but then 2020 is what really kicked things off there. Just the total screwed up environment there was. I mean, it was just, with COVID and everything else going on. And
when was George Floyd's incident?
George Floyd was in 2020.
Was that 2020?
Yeah, it was 2020, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
The George Floyd incident, and that was the really major catalyst there.
I think so.
Against law enforcement there. And, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, Travis Yates. He's a retired major with Tulsa PD. He does a lot around the nation talking about courageous police leadership. And there's a lot of things about the George Floyd incident that came out. I'm not saying that Officer Chauvin wasn't wrong in what he did, but I do not believe that Chauvin had any intent whatsoever to murder George Floyd. And there were other contributing factors to his death also, besides Chauvin, kneeling down on his neck also.
Which goes into what we were talking about a minute ago with the mainstream media. I watched a lot of the extended videos, as I'm sure you did. You saw some things that not everybody got to see.
Right.
The mainstream's going to show you what they want you to see. And right up to what led up to his death, I mean, didn't he have fentanyl in the system?
Yeah, fentanyl. I think he had a couple of different drugs in his system.
So there's a lot that led up to what is going on.
Yeah, they had just committed a crime.
Yeah, and I don't in any way. Okay, was Chauvin correct in how he did that? You can sideline quarterback, everything that you do. Do I think he had any intention to murder George Floyd? Absolutely not.
Right.
They were effecting an arrest. Did he do some things wrong? Absolutely. But do I think it got blown out? And the public not know everything? The reason I'm bringing that out is here we are with, it's 2023, and having been a former administrator with your position, and me having been in the positions I was as in administration with another sheriff's office, I'm sitting there telling you it made such an impact. Remember back when you and I tested to get in Dothan PD, and how many people tested at that point? I know that when I sat for my first test with Dothan PD, they had to do it in 2 different sessions because there were like 500 people tested.
Right.
You were the same thing. There was just a bunch of people wanting to get into law enforcement. I had to go out and recruit and hunt people down to hire in 2022, right before I left Henry County Sheriff's Office. Nobody wants to get into this business anymore. And if they are getting into this business, it's like you and I talked about, a while back. They're going to departments where they're paid, when I say an exorbitant amount of money, there's really not an exorbitant amount of money
for cops,
but for the going rate being paid right now, they're going to departments that are paying top dollar, giving them cars to, drive home, and that's a good thing, but they're not getting into it because they feel like they're being called to it.
Right.
And that you just don't see that anymore.
Yeah. I don't think we can continue to recruit blindly. We've got to inspire people to be law enforcement officers. We've got to be on the lookout for younger people in our communities, and we've got to inspire those individuals. We've got to look for those, and you can pick them out as a law enforcement officer with a servant's heart. You can identify those younger people in your community that have a true servant's heart and would make a good law enforcement officer. I give the example of if you're at a recruiting fair, whatever, it may be a military institution, it may be just a regular job fair, whatever the case may be, and you've got 3 individuals that are walking by the table. They really have no interest whatsoever, never even thought about being a law enforcement officer. And then you got a recruiter that says, hey, y'all stop over here just a second and talk to me. And they're like, hey, we pay $50,000 a year to start off. We're going to give you a sign-in bonus. We give you a car to take home. You got Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance. You got X number of holidays a year, vacation time.
Where do I sign up? Come on.
And we're going to furnish you everything but your underwear and your socks to come to work with every day.
Yeah.
And there's people thinking, hey, man, this law enforcement thing, it might not be a bad gig. I think I might try it. Now, are these people truly inspired or truly called to be law enforcement officers? No.
No, you're dangling a carrot in front of them.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that they won't make a good or a decent law enforcement officer, but I'm just saying they're probably not going to. They're not going to be fulfilled during their career. They're not going to be at the top of their game. They're not going to make the best law enforcement officer. I had a chief several years ago tell me, he said, we're interviewing people. He said, we're hiring people that have come through the process like 3 different times. This is their 3rd time up for an interview. And we're hiring them not because they're the best candidates to be a law enforcement officer, but because we can't find a reason not to hire them. They passed the polygraph. They passed their background check. They passed their drug test. They passed the written test and the physical fitness test. Now, this person's probably not cut out to be a cop, but we've got an opening we need to fill, so we're going to fill this opening. But
we
don't need to be hiring people just to fill openings.
But that goes back to what I said. There you go. That's the mentality right now, because you're not getting all right, look, I'm not saying anything negative about anybody that's, applying for law enforcement positions now, but you're not getting the prime candidates that are going to be that driven guy or lady that's going to get in there and be a solid, integrity-driven law enforcement professional. You're getting people, like you said, they're dangling a carrot in front of them. Go, oh, that sounds cool. Let me go do that. And I mean, you and I've seen some come up like that, and they never thought about being a cop, and they turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah,
but that's few and far between.
Truly, if you just say you're going to hire 10 cops, in my professional opinion, you need about 100 candidates to be able to get the very best 10 law enforcement officers to hire.
I agree with that. 100%.
You really need about 100 candidates.
So I have a question with that. Like, what are, like, when you say someone that is just in it for the money versus someone that's called to this, what's the differentiation there? Like, how do you? I don't know. That's just that's my question.
Yeah. Well, some people just have a servant's heart. They want to be a public servant. To be a law enforcement officer, to truly be an effective law enforcement officer, you've got to have a love for people. You've got to love your fellow man.
Which is funny, and it's funny. I don't like being around people. Okay, well, I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, oh man, I just don't want to be in these crowds. I don't want to be around people. Most people are, you just don't want to deal with all the drama and everything that comes in there. But he's right. It's funny because you'll see most cops, especially the true police officers, the true law enforcement professional, while they don't want to be, they get tired of the average thing that they have to deal with all the time, and it kind of makes them cynical. So that's the word I was looking for. It makes them cynical about people. They still have a love for people. They still want to see the best thing happen for society. They still believe in what they're doing. Yeah, they want to help people. So I agree. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. But you're exactly right. But you've got to have a true love for people because, Romans 13:4, and this is a verse that I use in my Bear the Sword presentation. It's a verse that I was taught by my father years and years ago. But Romans 13:4 says, "For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil." Now let's go back to the very first phrase in that verse there. What is our first commandment as law enforcement officers? For he is the minister of God to thee for good. And that's the biggest part of the job that we do every single day. We're not involved in gunfights. We're not involved in chases. We're not involved in a lot of action. Law enforcement's about 5% sheer excitement and terror and about 95% boredom and mundane things that we do every day. But, for he is the minister of God to thee for good. So doing good is our biggest thing. Chief John White used to say, he was our chief at Dothan PD, and John White used to say there's only two kinds of people that we deal with in law enforcement, bad people and good people who are having a bad day. You're dealing with thugs and criminals, or you're dealing with somebody who's been in an automobile crash, their child's missing, their lawnmower's been stolen, whatever the case may be.
Or just circumstances are giving them something that we're giving them the day where they just make bad decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. But you've got to have a love for people. If you don't, the luster and the glamour and the excitement of the job will wear off pretty soon, and you're not going to have a very fulfilling career if your main goal is not to help people. You've got to have love and compassion.
That's good.
And the big word there is, Thomas, I think compassion. I mean, you got to love people, but you have to have compassion for what they're going through, which is hard to do.
Empathy.
Yeah. You deal with, okay, so an officer goes to, especially in an area like Dothan where you're going call to call to call to call. You may deal with half a dozen domestic disputes in 2 hours, and if you're going there and you've lost all compassion for people, you don't become effective at that point. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what led up to that. You've got to look at it from a human side and a compassion side, and kind of sometimes put yourself in the position of that person. That doesn't mean that you don't take action and do what's necessary as a cop, but you got to look at every situation with compassion so that you do make the right decisions.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now, as cops, we can never say, and I never ever wanted to hear any other cops say this, especially when I was in a leadership position, say that's not our job. Well, as law enforcement officers, everything is your job, because you know what? When people don't know who else to call, they call the cops.
Yeah, they call the cops.
They call the police. Okay.
You have to be a doctor. You have to be a therapist. You have to be a security guard. You've got to be a soldier.
Yeah.
I could continue the list on and on.
Marriage counselor,
all
those kind of things. But
which is funny because most cops, it's a very high divorce rate in cops. Do you really want a cop, giving you advice on marriage counseling?
Right.
Don't you say anything, Andy. Be quiet.
But you've got to wear a lot of different hats. And when I was sheriff, I would have a lot of people, and as an elected official, especially being a sheriff, and it doesn't matter where you're at, whatever county you're in, anywhere in the United States, people especially look at a sheriff in this manner. But I would have people, maybe a couple would come into my office and sit down. I say, y'all sit down. What do you need? What can I help you with? Well, we've got a problem, and it's not really a law enforcement problem. It's not a criminal justice problem, but we just didn't know who else to go to. And they would tell me what their issue was. And okay, maybe it wasn't technically our job in our job description or in our field of expertise in law enforcement, but it was my job as a law enforcement officer to get them to the right person to give them the help they need, whether it was Department of Human Resources, whether it was the rescue mission, whether it was a local church or a civic organization or a mental health organization. It was my job and any other law enforcement officer's job to make sure that they got to where they needed to be to get the resources they needed to get to solve their problems.
Completely off the. I mean, how many times did you have somebody come in like that and really you didn't have any answers for them, and they just wanted a pair of ears to listen?
Yeah, a lot of people
A lot
just
of times that's what it is
yeah,
too.
Yeah.
I have two questions to follow that. The first one that you guys, I'm sure, can answer, but is like, can you teach that? Can you teach someone to be compassionate, like in the police training, whatever it is that you guys do? Is that something that's taught, or is it just truly just like, hey, this is an open position, you come?
Andy may have a different answer. As far as teaching compassion, I've been a police trainer for a long time. I can teach you how to shoot. I can teach you how to clear buildings. I can teach you how, constitutional law. I can teach you right from wrong, how to follow, what we're supposed to do in code of ethics. I don't think you can teach compassion. I think you can develop compassion. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, Andy may have a different look on that. You can lead somebody into teaching them how to do the right thing. You can, but to be able to sit there and give you, I don't know if you can necessarily give someone compassion, but you may be able to help them develop it down the road. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they've got to have compassion in their heart to start with. I do believe, though, that you could bring it out of them by living the example of the kind of law enforcement officer that they should be. And, whether it's their field training officer or whether it's another officer. And, really what we need in law enforcement, too, is we need mentors. We need people to be able to mentor new officers. You don't need to just bring officers in. You're going to put them through a mini academy, put them through a short FTO program, send them off to the academy, bring them back, let them finish up their field training status there, and then put them on the street out there. Okay, you've taught them all this stuff, just like Eric said. You've taught them all the procedures, how to write reports, how to shoot, how to fight, how to drive, all these things right here. But have you truly mentored that officer and nurtured him or her and brought out what needs to be brought out in that officer? And I've seen officers that, would come and stay with the department, and they may go to their first critical incident. And after that, say, hey, man, this ain't for me. Here's my stuff. And
I'm okay with that.
Oh, yeah,
as long as they
that's a
don't
good
shut
thing.
down during whatever the incident they're dealing with. I'm okay with that. If you come to me and you say, look, this isn't for me. It's not for everybody. Watching somebody, seeing death is, we talked about it a little while ago. It's not necessarily normal. It's part of life. But in the ways that, police officers and soldiers and anybody else that, is in a high-risk environment is going to see that. That's not normal. Most people don't know how to handle that.
Yeah. Seeing somebody at the funeral home in a casket and seeing somebody actually see the life leave them at the very moment that they pass away, that they die, that's something totally different.
Especially from trauma,
that.
Especially from a traumatic event.
Yeah. A lot of people have seen their loved one, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather die, a death laying in a bed at home or whatever. But to see someone die as a result of a traffic accident, to see someone die as a result of a shooting or a stabbing or a beating or whatever the case may be, and really to see a child die is something totally different. And that's why I always said, it's not a job for everybody. And we know that, but that's exactly why we have to be selective when we're trying to pick law enforcement officers. Quantity almost never equates to quality.
And everything, but yeah, definitely that. Well, and that's what I was going to say. Is it sounds like a very specific type of person, someone that's able to deal with death well, while also being able to, so that's like almost not necessarily a closed off person, but someone that's a little numb, able to separate themselves. Is that kind of the idea?
Yes.
And then, maybe numb's not the right word, but
Right.
then also at the same time being open and compassionate and you know what I mean? It's like they got to be hard and soft.
I don't know if numb is the right word.
Well, if somebody was actually numb to it, they would be a psychopath or a sociopath.
Okay, yeah, not
exactly.
numb, but you know what I mean?
But,
I get what you're saying.
You have to
but
steel yourself a little
I don't know
bit.
if you have to be able to so when you're looking for, and it's hard to sit there and stand in an interview, sit across from somebody and say, okay, this guy's going to be able to do that, or this girl's going to be able to do that. You can start, after a long time doing what we've done, you can read people. And Andy and I've even looked at guys and said, I mean, he's going to be a good cop. He's going to be a good operator for the SWAT team. He's going to do, he's been good narc, whatever. But to sit there, I think somebody does need to be able to turn off the emotion temporarily. The problem with that is, and this goes into a completely different, stuff we could talk about down the road, and I think we should. But the problem with that goes into how does that person deal with that once that situation is over?
That's what I was
like with me
ask.
For the long time. Working the task force investigations here, I got to see a lot of dead people, and I've been in 3 different instances where we've had to be in shootings. A lot of bad stuff I've seen, as so has Andy. And during the time, I'm able to shut it off. But you see a lot of officers that they start packing it down, and they pack it down, and they pack it down, and they don't know how to deal with it when it comes up. Which is why you see a lot of officers that are, when they're off, they're self-medicating, and I use that term, alcohol or whatever. You do have to be able to turn off the emotion during the time, but you can't leave it off. Because if you leave it off, you really start to turn into something that you don't even want to recognize. So, Andy, what do you think about that?
When we talk about love and compassion, that love and compassion is not only for the public that we serve, but it's also for the other law enforcement officers that we serve with. My daddy was a cop for 36 years and imparted a lot of wisdom on me over the years, and I surely wish he was still around today. But he used to tell me, he said, son, you'll have all of your old buddies from high school, and you'll have, other friends that you've made, in college or whatever the case may be. He said, but most of all, your really true closest friends will be other cops, because only they know what you go through on a daily basis. And that's true. And not to say that you should not have friends and associates outside of law enforcement, because that's definitely a good thing, because cops tend to, if they only congregate with each other, they end up being cynical, and they end up being, they talk about the job all the time and how bad this is or how bad that was. And all. You need outside influences in your life, not only outside friends, but, you need faith and other things too, and other social activities to temper that law enforcement life that you
have to be able to turn that life off. And for so often, all right, so when I first started, I'd be off. My daily wear would be blue jeans and my tactical boots. I always got my gun on me, and I'm always like, oh, what's going on? A lot of young guys are like that. But you got to be able to. I've got mine too. So you got to be able to turn it off and be a regular person. But you find out that over time that gets harder and harder and harder. Mm-hmm. But again, I think that's something that we could probably sit down and talk about a whole 2 hours worth on just stuff like that. Yeah. Here's a question I have. You had one other question. What was it?
It was about the state of policing, and I was actually just about to ask it. What is it exactly? We've seen, you said, with Ferguson in 2014, and then 2020, the George Floyd thing, and all of this stuff has kind of just blown this all up, right?
Oh, those are just two. There's
those are just
two.
I remember a ton in 2020. It was like thing after thing. It felt like, because I guess the media was using that to propagate an agenda.
Yes.
But okay, conspiracy theories.
Well, we all do. We all have like our narratives that we believe, and we push those forward because we believe them.
No,
anyway,
not me. I don't.
So, what I was going to ask is the state of policing. Then, is it solely because of what happened with George Floyd and all that, or because it seems like it just sort of brought something out that was already there, and that's what you had said kind of before 2014. But why do you think the state of policing has been so degraded, or has it? When you were young, were people just flocking to be police officers?
Yeah, because you wanted to drive. Look, it was exciting. When we were young, one of the biggest things on TV was, cop shows. I could sit there and name half a dozen, but I can't think of them right off the top of my head right now.
I mean, I remember Columbo. We watched Columbo all the time. Me and my wife.
Rescue 911.
Adam 12.
Adam 12.
Yeah,
you had,
yeah.
The TV show SWAT. I remember watching that with my dad.
Yeah.
T.J. Hooker. It was the three movies that really stand out movie wise. Lethal Weapon series of movies. I mean, it was cool. Martin Riggs was cool. You know?
So they sort of glorified that.
Yeah, they glorified all that, and that's what. You go look for, books that you read, they're about crime. You go watch movies. Movies are about crime, about cops. And your hero in the movie is a cop. So yeah, we were being, to use a term you said, glorified, And then fast forward to now.
Yeah, we're being vilified.
We're being vilified. The bad guys being glorified. You've got all these, there's a show.
Social justice.
Yeah, social justice, that came up.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, that's what's going on now. That's
you're
big
saying?
Term.
I thought you said there's a show called Social Justice.
No. There's a show,
okay.
and it's actually a good show. I say it's a good show. I probably shouldn't be watching it, but the long story short, in the show, you start actually rooting for the bad guy who's a drug dealer, he's a murderer, but you start rooting for him because that's kind of how they're driving the show. And where used to it was
psychological.
So yeah, you've seen this turn to where law enforcement's like Andy said, being vilified. And here's the big thing about that: it's not like that. There are, and look, don't quote. I mean, I'm going to give you a number, but it's not necessarily accurate because these numbers came from 2018. Erica did some research on some stuff we were trying to get, some stuff at the department we were in. There was 990 some odd thousand police officers in the United States. When I say police officers, I mean police officers, law enforcement, any kind of law enforcement officer.
Anybody carries a gun and a badge, whether they're actually on the street working or not.
It doesn't matter. And again, I don't have an accurate count, but it's 990 something thousand. That's. I mean, we have a population of 330 million. Okay, roughly. But you had 900 and some odd thousand police officers, law enforcement officials. Of that, I mean, when she did the number of unjustified use of force towards the civilian populace, the numbers were so low, they were almost, it was like 0.02. So the point I'm trying to make is the law enforcement officers that were working in the time of 2018 when she did the research, you have a staggering amount that are out there doing the right thing. They literally are going to work because they want to go to work. They want to make the world a better place. They want to do the right thing to make it home to our families. All right? And now fast forward to 2023, we can't even get guys to come in and work because, seriously, I've been told, I'm not going to use his name, but one of the guys that worked for me, scared to death that not only is he going to do something that might cost him his life and then his kids don't, know him because they don't have him anymore. But at the same time, he's worried he's going to end up in federal prison, and for doing something that could be justified. We get into cops being, especially when you go to these liberal.
He's got to go find another job.
Yeah, he does. He's got to go, and he does. He needs to.
Yeah, he needs to.
But especially in these, and I'll say what it is. You're really trying to bring out the conspiracy theorist in me now. Okay? So, not that it's there, but it is. Anyway, these blue states where you've got these very, very liberal DAs in office, they're looking for any reason to prosecute a police officer. So, you think that makes us feel confident in doing our job?
I'll tell you what, we're very fortunate here in our little corner of the world, here in the southeast United States. You go north to Atlanta, it's different. You go north to Memphis, it's different. You go to New Orleans, it's different. Going down south around Miami area, it's different. But in our little corner of the world here, we're very blessed.
Fortunate,
that,
yes.
Most everybody here are conservative thinkers. They're a Christian population by nature, and most 99.9% of these people want good, effective law enforcement. So we're very fortunate in the area of the country that we live in.
Right.
I can't imagine some of these people in other areas of the country that are run by liberal.
L.A.
Yeah, by liberal politicians that have taken the power away from law enforcement officers, that have made it where it's not even a felony until you steal $1,000 from your local CVS or Walgreens, and you see these people in San Francisco and other areas of California just walk in and they're raking stuff off the shelves into a bag and they just walk out the door.
Yeah, because
There's
they're
no
not
action.
being prosecuted. There's no accountability.
Yeah, and law enforcement, they're not given the power to arrest them. So the cops in those areas there, I'll tell you what, that's really, really tough. There's we need to encourage the current generation of law enforcement officers that we have now. There's three things that I would like to accomplish was what I call the Bear the Sword project. But we need to make sure, first of all, we honor those law enforcement officers who have given their lives in the line of duty. We need to honor their families who no longer have a loved one in their home now because they gave their life in the line of duty. We need to honor those who have been disabled in the line of duty and can no longer perform their duties. And we need to honor those who have retired after a 20, 30, 40-year career in law enforcement. The second thing we need to do is encourage. We need to encourage the current generation of law enforcement officers that we have now, the men and women who are showing up every single day. They have low staffing numbers. The call volume is high. And to tell you the truth, some of these law enforcement officers don't have very effective leadership or leaders who support them either. But these people are showing up every single day to do the job that they took an oath to do. And we need to make sure we encourage this current generation. The last thing we need to do is inspire. We've got to inspire future generations of law enforcement officers. The worst thing that cops are doing today, cops, former cops, retired cops, members of the general public, they're saying now, I wouldn't encourage anybody to get into law enforcement as a career today. Well, if we don't encourage, if we don't inspire future generations of law enforcement officers, where will they come from? What are we going to do? Can you imagine a nation without law enforcement? I mean, the United States is a nation of laws. And without law enforcement, those laws are just merely suggestions. And even good people who would suffer no consequences if they broke the law might then become criminals. But we can't have a nation without law enforcement. If law enforcement in this country fails, then our country will fall. It would be a lawless third world, Somalia,
Guatemala,
Mexico, Venezuela.
Well, and see, that's
Cuba.
the thing is I think our culture, apart from the South, I'll say, like you said, we are very fortunate in the South to not have to deal with this as often. But the culture surrounding us is kind of saying, morality is relative. It's kind of what you want it to be. Truth is relative, and if you start moving in that direction, I don't think people understand where that actually leads. They think it leads to freedom when in reality it leads to, like you said, those other government types that are like awful, absolutely awful. The one I can think of that's just off the top of my head is when Soviet Russia took over, you know what I mean? And they were fighting the same fight that our culture is fighting today, which is tyranny and capitalism. It's like, hey, we don't want to be capitalists anymore. So instead, the better option, I guess, is communism. It's like, wait a second, I don't think you understand
what communism is.
Yeah, and we don't understand where we actually are trying to go with this. We just know there's people that are like, I know that this is wrong. I feel like this is wrong, so we need to just do away with this thing. And it's like, well, you're not thinking about the end game here.
Yeah, well, what people don't realize is, and everybody wants their own truth, but what they don't realize is there is only one truth.
That's right.
There is only one truth.
That's right.
Okay.
There is, yeah.
And that's a good statement right there. Everybody wants their own truth. Society's going into this, you can do what you want as long as you're happy. Your happiness means everything. It's a very selfish thought process. Society now, if you look at anything on the left, is everything is okay. We get into other topics. I'm just going to call it what it is. I don't care if things. Once we get this going really good, if it gets canceled, I don't care. I'll stand up and spout it out. But
Right.
Transgenderism, you can be whatever you want to be. Blah blah. It's just a bunch of crap. There's only one truth. It comes from the Holy Bible. Period. There's only one truth. You can sit there and say, well, I want my truth to be my truth. There's no such thing. Truth is truth. That's it. Math is math. Numbers don't lie, okay?
Yeah.
You can sit there and put an equation together all you want to, but numbers don't lie. It's truth.
Right.
The same thing with the Holy Bible. It doesn't lie. It's truth. It's the only truth.
Right.
You can sit there and say, hey, well, to me, this is that. No, that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
Well, our nation was built upon freedom. And people are free to think whatever they want to think. They're free to do whatever they want to do, but don't push that agenda on everyone else. If you want to do that, go in your own little corner over here with a group of like-minded people and do that. But the problem today is we've got, and it all boils down to good versus evil. There's nothing else. The only truth is good versus evil. You know, we don't. You know, it's not flesh. It's principalities.
Yep.
That we strive against.
Yeah.
It's evil.
But that's been a fight that's been going on. That's been a fight that's been going on since the dawn of creation.
Yeah.
It's always come down to good and evil.
Yeah.
We're just fighting it and seeing it in a different way now.
Yeah.
The tactics of the devil have not changed. They're the same. He's just using the division and the, what's the word I'm looking for? Deception.
Right.
You know, the way he always has.
He's the great deceiver.
Exactly. So I got a couple questions myself, and this is for Thomas. And so I guess one's not a question. It's kind of going what you said. You said one thing, Andy, about we as, you know, as administrators, as senior officers, as former officers, retired, whatever. We should never sit there and not encourage people not to go into this business. Unfortunately, I can't sit there and I'm ashamed of it. You know, I went through a lot of times where, you know, you have highs and lows in your job. And it is not for everyone, but it is for some.
Yeah. We need to tell them the truth.
We need to tell them the truth.
They need to know the ins and the outs, the ups and the downs.
I would have a lot of people. Yeah, absolutely. I would have a lot of people come up to me and say, "Hey, how can I get into law enforcement?" Or I want to get into law enforcement. How can I do that? Excuse me. And I went through a period there where the first thing that I would sit there and say was, you know, don't. And that was wrong of me. It was incredibly wrong of me. But I was trying to be honest with them. Don't. I need you to go home and think about it first, because it's a very hard job. It's hard on not only on you mentally, it's hard on you physically, it's hard on your family. You know, even with just the hours that you're going to work, the stresses that you're going to bring home. You know, we can all sit there and say, "Hey, I don't take my job home." That's a crock of crap. Okay, we all take it home.
You never get away.
You don't.
Truly.
I've had people come up to me when I'm off, you know, and I'm sitting there, you know, fishing. You know, hey, let me get my hand on my gun, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't ever actually turn it off.
Right.
Having said that, it is very hard on your family. It's just a hard job, but it's a worth it job. Andy made a good point. If law enforcement fails in this country's doomed.
Yeah.
You have chaos and anarchy.
Yeah.
You've heard of the thin blue line, right?
I think so from the last time we talked, actually.
Okay, so the thin blue line is the analogy of what law enforcement stands
Separation.
for. The separation of good versus evil.
Oh, okay,
and we're the thin blue
Yeah,
line,
okay.
you know, that stands in between that. Well, it's not necessarily just an analogy. It's actually real. It is the thing that stands between good and evil. It's the consequences if you violate the law. It's the unpaid debt, okay? And if that thin blue line breaks, if that thin blue line goes away, if it fails, well, we fail. So here's where the question is: how do we inspire the next generation? How do we do that? And Andy and I can sit there and have this conversation all day long. I want to know some thoughts from you.
Yeah, no, that's actually something
outside
I was going to
looking in.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you guys. So, but I do have an idea of what I think is a solution to people trying to get into things they're not called to, instead of just searching for money. You know, like the root of the problem is that they want success in an area that they're not called to be successful, or their version of success is wrong. You know, and I think that personally, I would tell someone, look, you need to look at the root of why you do the things you do. Like, what does it all actually come down to? Because you yourself have to be in line with what is true. You yourself has to be searching for what is good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you're not, then you're going to insert yourself into places you're not meant to be. Mm-hmm. You're going to insert yourself in. You're going to be a person that is not helpful in whatever situation you're in. Yeah. Because you're not searching for the things. So it really comes down to what's going on the inside of you. And I think if we can inspire people to look on the inside of them more and allow God to do a work on the inside of them, you know, that would definitely lead to, I think, a more profitable, more beneficial society.
Here's what I'm going to say to add to that. So this is a question I was going to ask you. And I mean, Andy, you can chime in on this because you probably think the same thing I do. So, what we're trying to do with what we're doing here, this podcast, we want to shepherd men to be men again. We said that earlier. We want to motivate men to live that godly life, and just see what happens when you do that. And it's not like it's everybody gets, well, I don't want to do that. That's not fun. It is fun, man. You can make everything great, especially you got God and Jesus with you. So the long story short, what we want to do here is we want to motivate not only men, but we want to motivate law enforcement, any first responder, because firemen, soldiers, everything that in that service-driven, profession where you have that calling in your heart. So, to me, the best way to sit there and do or kind of put that is, I'm going to ask both of you a question. It's kind of probably going to get a packaged answer here. But would Jesus have made a good cop?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think he had the right personality. Definitely had the right personality. He had a servant's heart, number one. He loved people. He could get violent if he needed to. He proved that in the temple.
Yep.
If there was evil going on. He was very good at resisting temptation. The devil himself tempted him numerous times.
And he stood for truth.
Yeah,
Yes.
he stood for truth, and he knew that there was only one truth.
That's it.
There.
Yeah.
So having said that, I think we answered the question on how we inspire the next generation to be law enforcement officers. We need to be following Jesus.
Yeah.
I remember what it was you said the first night we did the praise and worship music here at the Stockyard. I saw a side to Thomas that I hadn't seen, before. I mean, you got on the kids. You want to be a man, you follow Christ.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You want to be a good cop, you follow Christ.
That's right.
You want to be a man, you follow Christ. He is the ultimate example of what we need as men to follow. He's the ultimate example of someone with a servant's heart. That's what he came here to do.
Yeah.
He came here to rescue everybody on this planet from every sin that ever existed to every sin that ever will exist.
Right.
And I can't think of anybody that would be better suited to put on a badge.
Yeah.
And if you truly have that servant's heart
That's good.
and you want to follow that and you want to stand up for justice and stand up for the victim and stand up to do what's right as a cop, you need to follow Christ.
Yeah.
There's there's no other way to put it.
Yeah, to be beneficial to anybody, it has to be Christ, and anything we do, for sure. And so that's that kind of begs the question then, like, how? Again, I have two questions. Is like, how do you implement that in law enforcement? How do you implement that idea of like, hey, Jesus is the best example of being a law enforcement officer? And then the second thing is like, well, I guess maybe that's just my main question. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I think you can do that mostly by living the example.
Okay, yeah.
In front of people who may want to be law enforcement officers, who you're trying to inspire to be law enforcement officers, and those that are already serving. Because it goes back to that mentorship that I was talking about earlier. Every cop needs a good mentor, somebody to help guide them through their career. And it doesn't matter if they've got 1 month on the job, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years on the job. You can still have a mentor, and also be a mentor also. I mean, that's something that good cops need to do. They need to mentor and nurture officers. Now, we need to identify those officers. First, we need to identify those people who might be good police officers and that we need to inspire. And then also we need to make sure that we identify those who are good police officers, who are on the job, and we need to mentor and nurture them and do everything we can to help them. Now, we can't make a bad cop a good cop, but we can make a good cop a better cop. And if we can make that better cop a great cop, and maybe we can make that great cop a great law enforcement leader or a mentor at some point.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, we also need to identify those that we need to get out of the profession. There are those that need to get out of the profession. Going back to everybody's so Full Metal Jacket. You remember what Gunnery Sergeant Hartman's orders were? His orders were to weed out all non-hackers who did not have the gear to serve in his beloved corps. And in law enforcement, we need to do the same thing. We need to get those bad seeds out of law enforcement. We don't need to let them sit there and fester and to grow into something that we don't want in our law enforcement agencies. As law enforcement leaders, we need to make sure that if we got an officer that's doing wrong, or they're just not cutting it, they're not going to be a good cop. Maybe we need to go talk to them and say, listen, I don't think this is a career for you. You may want to think about other career choices.
You remember Ray Smith? We need to bring Ray back. Ray had no problem telling people that.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah, Ray was very matter of factly.
Yeah, he was.
But we need to tell them that we need to get those out of law enforcement, because that one bad seed is what really ruins it for a lot of us. You have God knows how many thousands of people die from medical malpractice every single year due to being given the wrong medicine, whether in a hospital setting or outside a hospital. You have people that die from botched surgeries and other things in the medical field. When something like that happens, you don't see the masses protesting outside of a hospital or a doctor's office.
Which you should.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Like, that's a big deal.
But you let a law enforcement officer do something wrong, and then, the liberal left are bringing in people from out of town all over the country to tear up stuff and burn buildings and everything else. So that's just an analogy there. But we've got to police our own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because you can take a good police officer, somebody that has a very bright future, and a bad police officer can turn that good police officer. He can ruin them. I've seen that happen. I mean, I have. I've seen they start following that guy. But he's right. It's important. We've got to inspire guys to get in there and do this, like you said, for the right reason, and then start teaching other guys. And going back into this, we didn't really touch on it a lot right now, but the leadership that we have. You can take bad leaders. You can have a troop full of outstanding law enforcement officers, operators, whatever you got. And one bad leader can screw them up.
Absolutely.
So we need to be identifying, as Andy has said, inspiring those others to step into that leadership role.
That's right.
Because if we don't have those guys stepping up, we don't have anything.
Right. And that goes with anything as a man, especially. I know that there are women in law enforcement and stuff, but specifically we're talking to the men because we feel like that's kind of we're all men here. We understand how men think.
Yeah. That's the ministry.
That's the ministry. So, but that comes down to, like, even in the home, that comes down to how you interact with people, period. Like, leading people, how your leadership goes is how the people that follow you go. Like, absolutely, in everything you do. And if you can't lead well at home, like, I would venture it would be very difficult to lead well anywhere else. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big part of it. And if you can't lead yourself well, like, that's also a big part of it. Like, I think that would be a red flag probably if you saw, like, hey, this person doesn't get up on time. They don't take care of themselves. Like, they can't lead themselves well. They're probably not going to lead others well. They're hard on themselves, like really, really hard on themselves.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
That's not necessarily a bad thing.
But they see themselves in a way that's not true, or whatever that might be.
I see what you're talking about.
And so they're probably going to see others in a way that's not true.
Like, being critical of yourself is sometimes a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can be overcritical and, really tear yourself down and be unhealthy with it. But I think we need to be critical of ourselves.
Well, you just need to be true. You need to be truthful with yourself.
That's it.
Okay, I can go with that. Yeah.
We're typically our own worst critic most of the time. Or people who really want to excel are their own worst critic.
Yeah.
And things are not typically as bad as they make it out to be sometimes. But we just got to be truthful with ourselves.
There's your Rohan.
Sorry, Erica's got my son over there.
The philosophy of good leadership is pretty straightforward and easy. The execution is what's difficult.
That's a good statement. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And going back to one thing that was said, can we actually say that we're all men here? Do we have to identify anything here? Are we using pronouns?
Yeah, we do have to.
Okay, on this podcast, we are not using pronouns.
I'm leaving.
No. Yeah, but and something that I kept thinking of, that because when you guys were talking about vetting people for police academy and all that kind of stuff, and it was like people getting into it, not understanding what it was going to take. I kept thinking of the scripture where Jesus says, count the cost, because getting into it's like equating entering into a relationship with Christ and getting into this police academy. I don't know why, but I keep seeing that correlation. And maybe it should be that way. I think any public service thing should be that kind of idea, like count the cost, think about this for a little while, like you said, and really determine whether or not this is what you're called to do. Yeah. But Jesus said, count the cost, because if you follow me, you're going to have to
be persecuted.
Yeah, there's some things that are going to happen to you, and things that are going to have to be broken off of you too, that maybe you're not going to like, and so it's the same, and persecution, even with police, it's like, hey, this isn't just sunshine and roses. You don't get paid a lot of money to be persecuted. You're going to get paid a lot of money to get persecuted, or whatever it is.
Wait, we get paid a lot,
or
of
the
money?
Benefits. The things that they're trying to get. Because you guys said they're trying to draw people in with lots of, benefits and stuff.
I saw there's an agency in Alaska. I just saw the other day, and of course that's a whole different.
I bet I
it's
saw
a,
that.
it's a whole different world of law enforcement.
Yeah, different world there.
They're paying a $60,000 signing bonus.
Oh, a signing bonus of 60?
A signing bonus of $60,000.
I've seen a lot of the things go through my feed on social media, different things, Instagram, whatever. But yeah, I saw one the other day where they're, starting salary in Alaska is a 6-figure salary.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
But I haven't seen the one with a $60,000 sign-on bonus.
Of course, the cost of living in Alaska is a lot higher too.
Yeah, but they also pay you to live there if you're a resident.
Is it?
Yeah.
Man, I don't. So that's crazy, because I feel like there are less people in Alaska than there are in the United States or even Canada. Like, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, one thing about Alaska, you have to understand. Unless you get into one of the bigger areas, the more populated areas, what's some of the big Anchorage,
yeah.
There's another
Fairbanks.
one. Fairbanks, that's it. Unless you get into that area there, you got a lot of spread out area. You got a lot of spread out, wide open spaces.
And you're alone. I mean, Alaska is 1.5 times the size of Texas.
If you go to a call,
wow,
it may take you a day to get to that call.
You may have to, a lot of times they have to fly to a call. They have to be
gosh.
pilots also, because you get out of your car at the airstrip, and there's no way that you can drive to the remote location where the call's at. So you have to fly a plane.
And here's the other side. When you get to that call, just like he said just then, it may be just you, or it may be you and one other.
Yeah.
So you're there, and using that, where we are here. I've worked in areas, and Andy can attest to this. At one time, when we first started with Dothan PD, I'd be out at night working night shift, and the county would have, if they had 2 deputies on duty for a 600 square mile radius, they were doing good.
Yeah,
it's different now. They got more on now.
Yeah.
But with Henry County, 600 square miles, you got 2 deputies on, 3 deputies on, whatever the case may be. That's not enough. You get into a scuffle, you get into a fight, you get into a bad situation where you got bullets flying at you, and it's happened. You got your nearest backup is 15, 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
In a fight, 30 seconds is a lifetime, especially when you're fighting for your life.
Oh yeah.
Now you add on, you got to get guys to an airport, and then they got to fly into you.
I mean, I would think it'd be over in 20 minutes, or whatever.
It
Like,
could be.
something's
You could
gonna
be
happen
sitting there.
at that
You
point.
won the gun battle, and you're waiting on these guys to get there. They'll be here in 24 hours. So
Wow.
I mean,
That's incredible.
it's, a little different.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you guys this question, and because we've talked about, you said mentorship, like that seems to be the word, like mentorship seems to be the thing that's going to change. What are some practical things that you would say law enforcement officers, chiefs, whoever, sheriffs need to start implementing so that these things can happen? What's like some practical steps?
Let me go back just a second.
Yeah.
And we're talking about leadership. Well, a lot of agencies now, they're just hiring to fill slots. Okay? That pool of people that you're hiring just to fill those slots, what are they going to be your pool for in 5 to 10 years? They're going to be your pool for leadership. Those same people who probably shouldn't been cops, probably weren't the best candidates to be a law enforcement officer, are now going to be in leadership positions in 5 to 10 years. And then that's going to further take your agency and the profession down a road where we don't really want to go. So, but I think, first thing you got to do is, and I was lucky to have some leadership in my career that that gave me a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things, to get educational opportunities within the law enforcement field, to do training and things like that helped me. I'm gonna tell a story here real quick, but I was in special operations and training for 5 years during my career at Dothan PD. I was a sergeant there. I was over SWAT, K-9, motorcycles, the range, all the fun stuff. I had a motorcycle and 2 or 3 different types of machine guns issued to me, and did training every day, and all this kind of fun stuff, rode motorcycles and everything else. And every once in a while, Captain John Givens or Chief John White would come to me and say, "We need you to do this staff study, or we need you to do this budget analysis." And it may be something that may take me a week to do, to write up and all to get ready for budget hearings, or to actually.
That's the non-fun stuff.
Yeah, the book work kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
Something that we needed to write up and justify, justification for equipment or training or personnel or whatever. And they would give me these tasks to do. Man, I'd be kicking rocks and like, man, I don't want to do this crap. I want to be doing all the fun stuff, catching bad guys and training and everything. And about 3 months after I'd been elected sheriff, I took office in 2007. After about 3 or 4 months, and I was into my first budget cycle with the county commission, drawing up a budget and drawing up justifications for the equipment we needed and everything at the sheriff's office. I went back to, they were both retired at the time. I went back to John Givens and John White, and I said, "Thank you for giving me those things that I didn't want to do, because it prepared me for my role in the future as sheriff." And that's one thing I tell people is, do the things you don't want to do. And I tell leaders, make your people do the things they don't want to do, because it's going to make them better in the long run. It's going to make them a better, more well-rounded law enforcement officer, and in the future, a leader, supervisor, or administrator.
Absolutely.
You brought up a name there, and we're talking about leadership in law enforcement now. Andy made a good point. It was outstanding. What are these people going to be like? If you're using the warm body syndrome, to where I need to fill a spot. And a lot of guys get caught up in, if I don't fill the spot, the commission or the council or whoever's making the decisions above them, well, they're going to take that spot away. So we need to put somebody in it, which is not the right thing to do. And we have seen multiple times where that can cause more problems than that spot being vacant.
Right.
So identifying who's going to be a good officer, yet down the road be somebody to lead the next group that's coming in, you got to have that. So you went back to John Givens, God rest his soul. I love that man to death. He actually helped me when I got started. Outstanding example of a leader. John White too. John White. They both did something I'm going to say. When you identify who is going to be a good candidate to start a career as law enforcement. Sorry if you get background noise. We still have the coffee shop going. Excuse me. When you identify who's going to be a good candidate to be a police officer, you put them into place. You have to take the time to train them, but you got to stand behind them. Your guys are going to make, I don't want to say bad decisions from time to time, but they're going to make less than ideal decisions from time to time. And while you should, okay, we're just going to sweep that under the rug, we don't do that. But you still got to let them know that you're there with them. You got to have the guys that are experienced, and they can gain the respect of their guys by doing the right thing. But if you don't stand behind your officers and stand behind your deputies, you're really sending a bad message. John Givens was outstanding at doing that. I remember times he would pull me in and say, I don't know if that was the right thing to do. But by the time I left, I'm like, man, thank you, But then there was also times that when you did the right thing, when you did an outstanding, exceptional job, you also recognize that.
Yeah.
You have to have leaders that can sit there and take themselves. They can't be selfish. They can't go, walk around with, I'm the captain, look at me, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Or I'm the sheriff, even, with the sheriff. Not trying to blow smoke up your butt. I don't care about your butt, okay? You hear me? This guy right here would literally get out and ride around and patrol with his deputies. Now, he's got a department of how many did you have at that time?
75, 80 sworn deputies. Yeah.
He's got guys on the road, okay? He didn't have to do that.
Right.
But he's getting out. and he's riding around, he's answering calls, he's doing things with his guys. Do you think that didn't go a long way with them?
Oh, absolutely.
That right there sits there and says, our top guy, our boss, he's out here with us.
Right.
As a captain of the sheriff's office here, there's many times I would get out and, stay out with the guys and ride, do whatever, answer calls with them, kick doors in with them on, drug raids that we had. Mm-hmm. But you send a message to them. I'm not better than you. I'm just sitting there with more responsibility than you, and I want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. High levels of leadership are not about a photo op or a press conference only. Yeah. It's about getting out and doing the work. If you think that you're in a position, whether you're a captain or a commander or a chief or a sheriff, and that you're an administrator only, it's probably time for you to go into the house.
Yep.
And retire. I would think one of the things that I was proudest of as a leader is I don't think that whether I was a sergeant at Dothan PD or whether I was a sheriff or whether I was a chief of tactical operations at ALEA, I don't think you could go find anybody that I supervised or commanded that would say that I was mad at them whenever I disciplined them or counseled them. It was always about correcting a mistake. Let's get on the right path. Pat them on the back and say, "All right, let's go. Let's get back out there and get back to work."
Right.
And I've always had this mantra. Is one thing that I've always said about a leader or being a leader in law enforcement. That is, stand up for your people when they're right, stand beside them when they're wrong, and prosecute them when they're criminals. Mm-hmm. And so
kind of you lived by that. I can attest to that.
You know.
I mean, how many guys did you have to
4.
ultimately terminate? Well, not prosecute, but I mean,
4,
I think that I probably in my time about 4 different cops.
Yeah.
And it's not anything that you wanted to do, and it's not that I was mad at them. They broke the law.
Yeah. Right.
But how many guys that all the way up to the point where you had to terminate their position is never done out of anger. Wasn't done out of you're mad at them. It's just the thing that had to be done.
Yeah.
But you send these messages. I feel like I'm spitting on my mic. You send these messages, in everything you do as a leader, you've got to look at what are you training your people to do. And we may be getting off we may have gotten off on a tangent here from what we were talking about to start with. You hit me with something a minute ago that I've never really kind of thought about. Well, I mean, I have thought about it, but I probably didn't put it in words. That when you're hiring these guys, what's this guy going to be in 5 years? What's this guy going to be in 10 years? Did we think about that when we were starting out? What am I going to be in 5 years?
No.
I mean, I just wanted to get out and chase people, right?
I think really in law enforcement agencies today, whether you've got a senior member of your agency, or maybe even bring in somebody that's retired on a part-time basis, but whenever you've got a brand new cop, you need to sit down with them maybe after they get back from the academy or after they've been there for just a little while and say, listen, what is your career path? What do you want to be? Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Do you want to be a canine officer? Do you want to be a narcotics investigator? Do you want to work in the investigations division? You want to be a homicide detective? Do you want to be chief one day? You want to be a canine handler? Whatever the case may be. And then help them, sit down with them. And my career just was kind of haphazard. I mean, I worked in narcotics a large part of my career and some other, specialty units and that kind of thing, but it just kind of fell into place. But need to sit down with these younger cops and say, where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years? And then help them set forth a path. Use the experience that we've had in law enforcement, whether we're retired or current law enforcement officers, and put them on that path to where they want to be, in their career. And, whether it be training wise, experience wise, or education wise, I wish to God that I would have went and finished my education.
Yeah,
I never finished my bachelor's degree, and I wish that I would have done that. I would encourage young officers to do it, but I was too busy working.
You were a cop.
Fun.
That's the problem. You were a cop. I was the same way.
Yeah.
I started, and I didn't see myself doing anything else.
Yeah.
How many times did you sit there and go, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to be a cop anymore. I think I'm going to go be an accountant, or I'm going to go be I'm going to go be a barista at a coffee shop. I'm going to go scoop ice cream. I mean, you didn't do that. I still, to this day, see myself as a cop.
Everybody's got to be good at something. Eric.
There you go. I know.
Yeah.
So But I mean, you think about it, Andy. Did you ever sit there and see yourself do anything else?
Never. I mean, I always knew what I was going to do my whole entire life. I mean,
How many guys coming into this now that
Yeah.
think that?
Yeah, a lot of them are like, man, you see cops now, whether it's male or female, and they get into the profession, and then after a little while, even though they might be a good law enforcement officer, they get to looking at saying, well, I can go over here and sell cars, or I can do this job or that job or whatever the case may be.
And
I can make more money.
Yeah.
And
'Cause it's money
about
driven.
the money, and it should never, ever be about the money. We need to make sure that we're paying cops a good salary so that they can make a good living. But, it's like my dad used
I was
to tell
about
me. He
to say,
said,
what was it your dad said?
He used to say, son, do you know why they call us police? And I said, why? He said, because we the poorest folks in town and the least thought of,
That's good.
And there's-
Yeah, but he
there's
said
some
something
truth to
else
that,
too about.
Well, he also said too. He said, "Son, we don't need to pay cops too much money because then you're going to be attracting the wrong kind of people that are getting into it for the money." And we're seeing some of that today with some of the higher salaries that are being paid. You see a lot of these agencies; they're throwing money. They just throw money at a problem, and they think that's the answer. It's not the answer. The recruitment really lies upon the officers that are within your agency. They're your best recruiters because they're the ones out there telling them, say, man, this is a great place to work.
Yeah.
They back us. They give us the equipment we need to do our jobs with. They give us the training necessary. And the biggest part of that equation is good leadership. If you don't have good leadership in an agency, I don't care what kind of bonuses you're paying. I don't care what kind of benefits you got. Sooner or later, you're going to lose people.
You're not going to retain people.
And if you don't lose them, they're going to be malcontents. They're going to come to work. They're going to stay there, but they're going to be malcontents. They're going to be sitting around grumbling all day long about the way things are, and sometimes rightfully so. You've got to have good, effective leadership to maintain your retention.
So if we go back to what we started with, driving this episode of what we're talking about, and with your program, Bear the Sword, that needs to get implemented in so many other places. It needs to be talked about. I mean, you need to get into different departments, stuff like that. Andy will attest to this. And I'll use this analogy. Police officer pulls a traffic stop. Let's say he's pulling a traffic stop on a guy that intends to do him harm because he doesn't want to go back to jail, whatever the case is. So there's the stage is set. Police officer pulls a traffic stop. Guy gets out. He's got his shirt halfway untucked. His hat's not on. Whatever, if they wear hats, I don't know. He looks sloppy. He's unkept. It looks like he doesn't take care of himself. Maybe a little overweight, maybe a lot overweight, whatever the case. He walks up to the car. What's that guy going to think?
I can take him.
I can take him, and I'm going to do it. No. Or you get the guy out. When the guy gets out of his car, he is squared away. He's got everything in position. He carries himself well. He takes care of himself. This stuff is somebody, and these guys are reading that. Okay, they're sizing you up at that point. Mm-hmm. What's that guy going to think of that police officer?
Right.
I'm not going to try this because this guy's he knows what he's doing.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, if you flip the script on that, you have officers, deputies, any law enforcement official, and they're looking at a department in the same way. Well, you know what?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they don't pay as much as these guys over here, but they've got squared away equipment. They've got updated equipment. The guys there, they have standards, and they look at the top, the upper echelon of the department,
Yeah.
and they've got good leadership.
That's right.
It's the same. It's kind of the same analogy.
Right.
You're going to want to go work for this department over here
Right.
because you're going to be able to feel more fulfilled, do your best, and strive to be as good as that department is. It's not always about money.
Yeah.
I went to a chief's conference when I was a chief of police for a short time of a small department. Then I went to a chief's conference, and that was the driving thing. How do we get and recruit and keep people? Mm-hmm. And everybody's all like, we've got to pay more. We've got to pay more. We've got to pay more. It's the first thing he said. It's not always about money. Your people have to feel like they're able to do their job. They're motivated to do their job. And they strive to the standard that you set.
Yeah.
How do we do that around here? And how do we do that to keep, people coming into this? That's the question that we're trying to answer right now.
Yeah, and I do, I'm going to get outside. Obviously, I'm not law enforcement, so my background and everything is in church and ministry. And one of the things about that is really great about the modern church, I'll say, because there's a lot of things that I'm not super happy with the state of the church today, as I'm sure a lot of us have our issues. But one of the things that I think the modern church is doing really well, it's inspiring people to serve in church, especially bigger churches. They're very good at, because all bigger churches and larger churches, all these churches, they're really, all the people that serve aren't paid. They're all volunteers.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so if you're able to have 200, 300 volunteers serving every Sunday, every Wednesday, events, even on Saturdays, they're inspiring people to be a part of this thing. And a lot of times it's because, and those people take pride in that. They're not paid. They take off work. They lose money to be a part of these things. It's like, okay, it's because a lot of times they're a part of something that is excellent. They can say, hey, yeah, I did that the other day and I'm proud of that. I went to that place. I was a part of that organization and I'm proud of that. You know, a lot of nonprofits are that way. Not that that's the way, not that it's correct or anything like that, but that's just the truth. And so, I remember learning this going through conferences and things like that. One of the things they would say is your church volunteer staff, like those people, they're staff. To have 200 or 300 people serving in a church, doing, serving coffee, doing whatever they do, serving in kids, all those things, you would be paying out the butt for staff to do that, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
So you need to do everything you can to show appreciation, to encourage, to inspire those people, because they're doing something for you that's unprecedented. And I think that a lot of organizations would do better to remember that, especially for those that they pay. It's like, hey, what are we doing to inspire, to like you just said, we're creating an organization that is excellent, so that it doesn't matter how much you get paid. They just want to be a part of this thing, kind of like Alabama football, Roll Tide.
You're not allowed in the stockyard.
You know what I mean? Like, they want to go to these. It's like, why did they have the dynasty? Like, I'm putting all these connections together. Why does the really good football team continue to be the really good football team? Because people want to be a part of it, not because they're getting paid any money or anything like that. Same thing with police academies and things like that.
Going back to your analogy with the church there, Thomas, it's called purpose.
That's it.
It's called purpose. And everybody needs to feel like they have a purpose. And everybody does have a purpose, and everybody does have a calling. They've just got to figure out what that calling and what that purpose is. And they've got to make sure that they're following that. And if they haven't found their purpose or their calling, then, I pray that they're seeking that daily, because none of us are ever going to be truly fulfilled until we do find that purpose that God has for us. And the Bible says He has a purpose for all of us. I mean, He knew each one of us before we even were formed in our mother's womb. And that's something I struggled with after retirement. Is I felt like, man, I don't have a purpose anymore. After 30 years of chasing bad guys and helping people with their problems and doing this, that, and the other, and supervising cops, it was like, man, I have no meaning in life, I have no purpose anymore. And then, God revealed to me that my new purpose in life was to inspire future generations of law enforcement and law enforcement leadership and supporters of law enforcement also. And that's when he revealed to me the Bear the Sword presentation I've got, and it's something that I was in Indiana week before last. I was in Birmingham, Alabama last week, presenting to some pretty good sized crowds of cops and law enforcement leaders, and that's my new purpose, and I'm satisfied with that purpose. Would I love to be back in law enforcement today, running and gunning and having a good time and enjoying that camaraderie and that excitement and everything? Yeah, but I don't.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, well, that's all up to the Lord, and I prayed about it many times, that if that is my purpose again, for Him to put me back in that position. But right now, I think my purpose is that of inspiring future generations, and I'm content with that purpose. Very content with that purpose, and I enjoy speaking to groups, and that kind of stuff's picking up for me right now. But last thing I'd like to say, and I think we probably need to close this session out here, but law enforcement is a huge commitment. There's 4 major characteristics that I think you absolutely have to be an effective law enforcement officer, and one of those is commitment. I'm not going to talk about the rest of them right now. We'll cover those a little bit later, but commitment is number one. And not only do you have to be committed, but your family, your loved ones have to be committed also, because not only is it not a profession or a career, it's a calling, but even more than that, sometimes it's a lifestyle, and you truly never get away from that. And I would encourage anybody that you've got to have buy-in from your spouse, from your loved ones. You know, if you're already in law enforcement before you get married, they should know what it's all about. They should know. And if you're married and then go into law enforcement, it's something that you and your spouse need to enter into very prayerfully, and make sure that you're answering the right calling, and that is absolutely your purpose, because it can cause problems in a marriage, because it is a huge commitment.
I think that's something that you could understand, Thomas. It's the same thing with being called to be a preacher. I mean, it's literally a lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, you don't preach on Sunday or Wednesday and then take that off and go, okay, I'm not a preacher right now.
Right. Right.
You're a preacher all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
after hours,
yeah.
whatever people will call you. You know, I used to have when me and Joe Watson were working on a task force together in narcotics for several years. We had this little sign on our office wall, and it had a picture on it, and it said, "This job's like wrestling a gorilla. You don't stop when you get tired. You stop when the gorilla gets tired." And that's the truth with being a law enforcement officer, or as a pastor, or as a doctor, or there's a lot of different callings that are not 8 to 4, 9 to 5 jobs every day where you put it up and you clock out and you go home. You know, I use that old analogy. You know, the coyote and the sheepdog in the old cartoon. You know.
Yeah.
Morning Fred, morning Sam, or whatever the names were. And they clock in, and beat each other up and try to steal the sheep and all that. And then they clock out, see you tomorrow. You know? It's not one of those
Doesn't
jobs.
work like that.
You know,
Right.
you just truly don't ever really get to clock out.
Right. And really what it comes down to is when you're passionate about it, it doesn't matter when you clock in and clock out. Your passion goes beyond just your 9 to 5. And that's a lot of times I think why people carry things home and do those things, because they understand the calling is a part of their life. It's not a job; it's their life.
Right. It's your purpose.
Yeah.
Well, I think you might be right. It's probably time for us to wrap this one up. Anything else you want to add on Bear the Sword? Now, keep in mind, I think that Bear the Sword's a program we're going to hear a lot more of.
Yeah. It's something that I've been inspired to do. I keep picking up different stories from different people and different things to add in to it. And usually it's an hour-long presentation. But I really enjoy speaking to crowds, and I've got some good reaction. I've got some more opportunities coming up to do some things across the country.
Would Bear the Sword be something that is, I know that you and I, obviously, we want to drive it towards certain aspects of the law enforcement community.
Right.
Not certain. We want to drive it towards the law enforcement community. But is it a program that can apply to other aspects of people's lives?
Yes, there's certain aspects that can apply, and also another angle that I'm taking this is that can talk to different groups and let them know what law enforcement officers do on a daily basis, what the characteristics are that a law enforcement officer needs to have, what are some of the circumstances law enforcement is involved in on a daily basis, and that kind of thing. It just kind of help the public relate to their law enforcement officers and their law enforcement agencies, because that's kind of, I guess, a part of my calling is to inspire future generations of law enforcement officers, law enforcement leadership, and supporters of law enforcement, because we need supporters of law enforcement in this nation.
Kind of bridge the gap of that division between cops and non-cops, I guess. Yeah,
Exactly. People need to know what to expect and what not to expect out of their law enforcement officers, and what the job, the career can actually consist of, and what the demands of the job are.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you would, one of the things that we're going to add as far as what we want to do with the Shepherd Station, when we get ready to close, I want you to read that.
That's what I was going to say.
Read that verse from Psalm that you.
That would be a great way to close out.
Yeah, this is one of the I was kind of tasked with coming up with some things to give law enforcement officers as they graduate from police academies around the state, and there were 5 commandments. This is something that God gave me in about 30 minutes after I was tasked to come up with something.
Funny how he'll do that.
Just what come to my heart, and there are actually 5 of these commandments for law enforcement. I'm just going to touch on this one here, and it's be a leader in the moments where leadership is needed most. And the verse that goes along with that is Psalm 78:72. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands he led them. And that's what we need to do as leaders. We need to lead people based upon biblical principles. We need to love people, and it's just like just going along with the shepherd thing it's just like said the Lord. He left the 99 to go after the one, to go after that, and that one is you that He'll go after there. And we just want to make sure that we're putting out good principles here that are based biblically based and are of a biblical worldview, and I think that's our mission here. Or one of our missions here, and I think we're going to discover some more missions as we go along. Some things are going on.
I've sat here and there's about a dozen things have come to mind as we're sitting there talking, because it's easy for me to sit there and take law enforcement and go, well, that applies here, that applies here, that applies here, because when you insert Jesus into everything, He is applicable in everything. And I don't want to say I'm new with my walk, but more renewed as of late to really move in my life in that direction. And He does. He applies to everything. So when we talk about all this, it all comes back to this. It literally all comes down to this. Whatever we're doing, whatever your calling is, whatever stage you're in your life, when you put Christ first, you can't ask for a more perfect example. And that's what we need to be doing, especially trying to push either law enforcement men, civilian men in general. No. And we need to look at the most perfect example of a man, and that's Jesus Christ.
He is the one and only truth, actually the way, the truth, and the life.
Yep.
Amen.
So we're going to close out with that. Hope you've enjoyed this episode the pilot episode of the Shepherd Station, brought to you from the Stockyard. Come see us at the Stockyard. We're open Monday through Friday, 7 to 5. Breakfast is served from 7 to 10 o'clock. Lunch is served from 10:30 to 2:30. And we've always got great ice cream, coffees, and Lotus energy drinks. Saturdays we do open. We're open from 9 to 12. Come over here and get some of the really good Mural City coffee. We'd like to add them in there. We get all of our coffee supplies from Mural City Coffee Works in Dothan, Alabama. Zach and Destiny are great people. Go see them too. And with that, Thomas, would you close us out in prayer?
Yeah. God, I just thank you for this conversation. I thank you for all the wisdom and experience that's just been poured out. God, we just pray that this conversation reaches those men, those police officers, just whoever it is in public service that needs to hear this. We just pray that they'll be encouraged, they'll be inspired to be more like Christ. And for those that don't know Christ yet, they don't know you, pray that they will come to know you and experience you in a way that's real, that changes their lives for the better. And we just pray for the Shepherd Station as you work and move in it, Father. We pray that you bless it and expand its influence so that you can be glorified in all of it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.